Hi my friend, in this video we're going to be making summertime new disco house bass inspired by ANOTR and Leven Kali song, How You Feel. And we're going to find out if we can do this in under 40 minutes by using the 80-20 rule of new disco bass production. What you're listening to right now is the song that we'll be working on. And what you're seeing right now is the Ableton project file that we'll be working on. In particular, we'll focus on this bass group right here. And we're going to go in order of how I actually built this all out so that you can follow along when you're creating the bass for your own tracks. Make sure you stick around to the end of the video because we'll be doing a full recap of the 80-20 rule so that you can apply everything you learned in this video to your own tracks and start finishing songs super fast. Because all in all, it only took about 30 to 40 minutes for me to make the bass for this one. And if we pull out here, you can see this song has been arranged, mixed, mastered, and it's completely ready to go. And it really only took 4 hours for me to finish this bad boy. So if you want to finish songs fast just like this, I've made you a free bundle of templates, samples, and special bonuses that I use to completely finish one song every single week just like this. Visit the link that's on screen now or in the description to grab the ultimate song finishing toolkit for free. And if you want to take things to the next level, you can also find a link to this video's project files in the description as well. But with that said, let's jump into this. Alright. So when it comes to the bass for this one, first thing right off the bat, just like usual, first thing you want to do is make sure you get the reference track in your project here, turn it off, and then set the solo key so that when you press the S key on your keyboard, you can flick back and forth to the reference track and what you're working on. This way you can make sure you're selecting the right notes, and then make sure you're choosing the right sounds when you're developing the sound design for your bass. And then one of the biggest things, flicking back and forth to make sure that your bass has the volume that's very similar to what's in the reference track. Those three things are going to be really quick, 80-20, getting 80% of the result with only 20% of the effort. So let's have a look at this. So the main thing here is, I guess let's have a look and a listen to the bass without me yapping for just a little bit. So the main thing is there's kind of like this, it's that rhythm. So this is the reference. Basically. So that's kind of what I went for, kind of a similar vibe, and then started changing it over time. One of the big things that I did for this one is before going straight into doing the bass, I tried to figure out some melodic stuff that I wanted to go against. So for me, at first I was doing it with that Tame Impala and Justice tune. I think Party On and Party Off or something like that. But it ended up not working. And so I had like a very different looking bass, or looking and sounding bass pattern, because I was trying to make it fit the vibe of the ANOTR tune, but then also fit the vibe of the eventual edit that I was going to be making. Over time that wasn't working, so I ended up swapping that out for this Dua Lipa song. And so what I did is I put this Dua Lipa song in here, and I also had this in my project file playing while I was figuring out the bass line. So what I want to do real quick is I want to show you what that looked and sounded like by just turning everything off other than the... okay, here we go. So it was like this. So I was flicking between having that on and then listening to the reference track while creating this. So this way I was not making a complete carbon copy of the bass and but being inspired by the ANOTR bass line while also thinking about where it was actually going to end up. So main things that are some takeaways here, other than that, which I think is kind of cool, flicking back and forth between the reference as well as building the bass to the main core hook or melodic thing that you want it to go against if you already know what it is, if possible. But in terms of the pattern here, there's kind of I want to just kind of sing it, but it's do 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 do, kind of like that. So it's almost that little held chord at the beginning and then that little rhythm. So if we have a listen to it by itself, you can kind of hear that. you can hear it there. And this looks more complicated than it like is, really. But basically what I did first was all these like thicker looking bad boys are the first notes that I programmed in. And so that's kind of like the main bit of like the notes that are playing. And then what I did to add like a little bit of extra like little pizzazz, almost as if like a drummer was playing it, I started playing with this new thing in Ableton 12 where like if you highlight one of these notes and you go down to, I think, transform. No, if you go to generate, no, if you go to, I thought it was, yeah, maybe transform. Yeah, you go to transform and you go to ornament. And with that note selected, what you can do is you can go to flam and then it'll add this little extra little note there. And you can adjust like the position of it and how loud it is. And you can also switch that off and switch it to grace note. And then you can have how many you want to show up. If you want it to be like jumping between notes, like go do that like low to high kind of little bit, or if you want it to be on the same. And the same thing, you can adjust like the position of it and that kind of thing. And so that adds like that little actual like musician playing it kind of like little element. It's a subtle thing because these are very small velocities, but it adds almost that little like extra little finger playing that a bass player might play as they're like rolling into the next note to add like a little character and vibe and like almost like a little bit of a percussive element. So it's very subtle, but I think it was really cool to experiment with that. You can really barely hear it, but I think it adds a little bit of humanization and feel to it. So that's like a nice little cool tip that you might want to do. Main thing I did there was like flick back and forth between the reference to get the similar notes. Then I was flicking back and forth between what I just created against the reference to the vocal that I had, so I can adjust like the chords that it was playing and the notes that it was playing, so that it's also fitting against the future vocal that I wanted to do. And then also like grabbing these and doing this little ornament, flam and grace notes a little bit to add a little bit of humanization and character to it. So kind of a little cute thing, cool thing, I don't know, that I worked on there. And that's like a kind of good look at the notes. I can't music theory tell you too much about what's going on here, but like there it is. Take a picture of it or grab the project files in the description if you want. But usually once I have those notes down, then the next thing I usually move on to next is the sound design. And the first things first is the sub sound. So I usually like to have 2 tracks. So I'm going to mute it so it's just the first track playing. So let's just have a look and listen to it. So if you don't have like headphones on or good speakers, you might even barely notice because the sub is definitely carrying most of the track here. And one of the reasons I like to have the sub on a separate layer is first, when you're creating the notes, it's very similar to the idea of as if you had like an acoustic guitar or a piano while you're figuring out the notes. It's like a neutral sound. You can focus on the notes, make sure that's done really nicely without getting without being influenced by the ear of the sound design or anything like that. In terms of the sub design here, I'm using this little rack I made called the V-Sub. You can grab this in the project files if you want, but it's really just a sine wave with some options to add in different types of saturation, which can help fill out the sound, make it sound a little grittier, and also help that sub be heard on laptop speakers a little bit more. And then I do have a 1-knob sidechain, so we're doing some sidechain pumping here, which is just set up as over here, Ableton Shaper device, going to quarter notes, which is what those kick are playing, and then it's just ducking up the volume, so that way you don't have to do any weird like mapping a compressor to the kick or anything like that. Just 1 knob gets it in there. And then throughout the track, I'm doing a little bit of automation with the volume, and I think I might be reducing rolling off some of the highs with a shelf filter somewhere. Nope. So it's basically just the sub playing through. And then the main thing is flicking back and forth, trying to make sure that it's kind of similar volumes and fullness, where I feel like mine might be a little bit too full. So I'd probably actually want to bring down the sub here, maybe like a decibel or 2 or something like that. Then the next thing is, once the sub track is set up, one nice thing is by having the sub track set up on its own like this, when you're working on like the mid bass, which is this second layer here, you don't have to, you can do all the sound design to your heart's content, and you don't have to worry about messing up the low end because the low end's being taken care of by the sub. So the next thing I like to add on is like a mid bass layer. For me, it's usually a bass guitar. And soloed, it sounds like this. Very subtle, just adding a little bit of extra character and grit to the sound. I chose a bass guitar. I usually like to have the same bass guitar patch in mind, and there probably is kind of a bass guitar sound in this. Definitely. Which is pretty cool. I like disco house music, that kind of thing. In terms of the notes, you'll notice there's nothing being played here. What I've done instead is, when this is set to all ends, it'll look at the MIDI notes on the track. But if you instead select something different, like subs for example, the MIDI from this is going to get routed into here. This way, as you're building up the track, if you make a change to the notes at all, it'll automatically be reflected on your mid bass layer. You don't have to do like any make a change here and then copy and paste it through the whole arrangement when you make a small change, which is nice. Main thing here is to have a pitch device set up so that you can easily bring up the notes by an octave or down by an octave in the instance where the sub sounds good at a particular octave, but then that particular octave sounds way too low or way too high on your mid bass layer. You can simply just adjust it here. Then I'm running into this bass guitar patch that I like. It's basically from the Trillion VST, but I don't like always loading up the Trillion VST. It takes a bunch of CPU and it's kind of slow and annoying. This way I just have it in an Ableton sampler device so I can just have it and move on quickly. Then, big thing when you're doing multiple layers like this, like a sub versus a mid bass layer, you're going to want to remove a bunch of the lows. So in this case, I'm removing everything under 194 hertz. That way the subs is taking care of the low end area, and then the mid bass is mostly like the mids and like the highs. And then we're shelving out some of the highs as well. Shelving out the highs can be a way to make the thing sound a little bit more natural sometimes. Sometimes it could sound good with a low pass filter. Sometimes it sounds good with a high shelf. I usually try to go for the high shelf first. So we're just removing some of the highs so that like some of that higher end grittiness isn't coming out as much. Trying to make it more of a subtle addition to the sub sound basically in this instance. And then a little bit of the standard channel strip stuff I like to do. We're removing some of the sustain. So this is a kilohertz transient shaper, which is a free device. You can grab this for free. I've just mapped some of the core knobs to a rack here, so I can quickly just adjust things without having to open up the VST. We're drawing back some of the sustain, so it's kind of making it sound a bit shorter, which can help it blend in with the sub sound a little bit, adds to some kind of cohesion. Then I'm running it into this width plugin, which is another free plugin from, this one's from Polyverse, called Wider. It's a cool kind of stereo imaging plugin. And I've again mapped some of the core knobs to this Ableton rack here. And the width plugin is just built up a bit, so that way it's pushing that sound to left and right, making a bit more stereo, and then also making it so like the center is nice and free for that sub to take up that area. And we're running into a similar one knob sidechain bit going on here. And that's really about it when it comes to the bass. Super simple stuff, kind of like a groovy, funky, kind of disco-y kind of bass, played by a bass guitar. I think ultimately that one sounds like it's actually played in, which is really cool. This one sounds maybe a little bit like there could be more of this mid bass and a little bit less of the sub if I were to keep playing with it, but that's pretty much getting close to the way there. What I like to usually do is like follow it for inspiration, get similar to it, but then start taking your own creative liberties as you're developing the track, so that you're not just creating a carbon copy and it's actually something that you can use. Put your own like flip, for example, like having the Dua Lipa Houdini over top. This sounds really badass. And it ends up being kind of your own tune that you could actually use, which is cool. But yeah, so what we'll do next is we'll do a nice overview of the 80-20 rule when it comes to the bass here, so you can have a nice recap of everything we've learned in this video and start applying it when creating your own basses. Before we do that, I want to mention that this video is also sponsored by our good friends over at Rocket Powered Sound. They hooked up the kick sounds that you're hearing and the drum loop here, as well as the snare sounds as well. And it's from their Ultimate Sample Pack, which has over 1,000 really sweet samples in it. And you can get 30% off of that if you'd like, using the code ULTIMATEBESTFRIENDS. Visit the link that's on the description as well, or visit the link that's on screen now and in the description if you want to check that out. So yeah, thanks to our good friends over at our RPS for hooking that up. Also, if you grab the project files, you'll get the Rocket Powered Sounds samples that I use in the drums here as well. So yeah, Thanks again for them for that. And with that said, let's jump into the 80-20 rule for this one. Hi, my friend. Matt from Best Friends Club here. And if you've been paying attention, then you probably have already figured out what the 80-20 rule is when it comes to building out your bases. So the goal here is to get 80% of the result with only 20% of the time, energy, or effort. And because the first key to the 80-20 rule of bass is to use a reference track, we're making sure that we're very easily hitting 80% of a very professional sounding track. In particular, we focus on nailing the notes that our bass is playing, the sound design of our bass, as well as the volume of our bass track compared to that reference track. This just keeps things fast and super focused. The second key of the 80-20 rule here is to layer your basses so that you have the maximum amount of control over your bass's melody, low end, and the character or vibe. The third and final key is to repurpose your old projects by adding old project files, racks, and entire groups to your Ableton collection folder. By creating a suite of powerful templates, Ableton racks, and one knob effects that you've personalized and curated over time, it's going to make sure that you get a higher quality result faster. If you'd like to get a head start by downloading all the racks, templates, and all the files that you've seen me use in the Ableton project file for this video, or if you'd just like to take a closer look at any of the techniques or tracks you saw me work on in this video at your own pace, you can find a link to this video's project files on screen now and at the second link that's in the YouTube description. I'm recreating a different song from the Beatport top charts every single week and making the project files available to anyone who wants them. You'll also get access to a private Discord where you can ask me and the community questions, as well as shared tracks for feedback. If you or your music are not quite ready for a shot in the arm like that, I've also made you a completely free bundle of templates, samples, and special bonuses that have helped me figure out how to completely finish one new song each and every single week. And you can grab that free Ultimate Song Finishing Toolkit by visiting the first link that's in the YouTube description here. However, if you just feel like staying on YouTube for now, that's totally fine. Save that link for later and check out this playlist of videos where I remake basses from other songs from the Beatport top charts. Or if you want to take what you learned in this video to the next level, definitely check out this video right here.